It began with silence. No cannons thundered, no flags were raised, and no victory was ever celebrated. Yet thousands died, kingdoms shifted, and a continent trembled in its shadow. Ask any historian about the great wars that shaped our world, and you'll hear the same names: the Napoleonic Wars, the Mongol invasions, the Crusades. But buried beneath the grand narratives, deliberately forgotten, is a war so devastating, so politically explosive, that it was scrubbed from the memory of nations. A war with no heroes, a war with no songs, a war that was never meant to be remembered. This is the story of the erased war. A war that never made it into the textbooks, but whose ghost still shapes borders, identities, and secret hatreds to this very day. Our story begins in the early 18th century, not in the heart of Europe, but on its fragile edge, on the borderlands between empires, where maps bled and monarchs lied. In the valleys of the Carpathians and the plains of the Balkans, two shadows prepared for a collision: the decaying Ottoman Empire and a rising power hungry for influence, the Habsburgs. But this was no ordinary conflict between East and West. This was a war fought in whispers, betrayals, and unacknowledged massacres. It was so messy, so politically inconvenient that both sides agreed, after it ended, to pretend it never happened. Historians would later refer to it, hesitantly, as the War of the Cross Silence. But even that name is scarce. The official records, burned. The soldiers' graves, unmarked. And those who lived through it, disappeared. What triggered it? Not a declaration of war, but a forged letter. In 1718, in a monastery deep in Transylvania, a monk named Istvan Zoltan discovered what he believed to be a letter written by a secret Orthodox patriarch calling for the unification of Christian Slavs under one ruler and the expulsion of all Muslim influence from the Balkans. The letter was a fake, a masterwork of deception, written not by a religious leader, but by an agent of the Habsburg court, desperate to ignite rebellion in Ottoman-held territories. Within weeks, villages were rising up. Clerics were slaughtered. Ottoman patrols vanished in the forests, never to be seen again. The Ottomans struck back, but not officially. No declaration was ever issued. Instead, war bands and mercenaries began to move under darkness, disguised as pilgrims or traders. Fortresses were seized, then mysteriously abandoned. Cities changed hands without a single newspaper reporting it. In less than a year, over 40,000 civilians were dead. But no army ever officially entered the war. Why? Because both empires were terrified of the truth. The Habsburgs had sparked a rebellion they couldn't control, and the Ottomans were cracking under the pressure of internal revolts. To admit war was to admit weakness. To record it was to risk revolution. So they chose silence. But silence leaves a scent that draws the desperate, the vengeful, and the ambitious. Among those drawn to the chaos was a name long forgotten: Katarina Vasa, the bastard daughter of a Swedish noble and a Serbian peasant. She led a group of rebel fighters known as the Veiled Cross. Operating from the caves of eastern Serbia, she waged a shadow war, sabotaging Ottoman supplies, poisoning wells, assassinating informants. She was never officially recognized. No portraits survive. But in a single winter, she orchestrated the destruction of 3 Ottoman supply lines, crippling their hold over northern Macedonia. By 1721, both empires had had enough. In a secret meeting outside Belgrade, Ottoman and Habsburg emissaries agreed to a pact. All references to the conflict would be erased. Katarina's name was to be banned from all official documents. Her fighters were hunted down, not just by Ottomans but by Habsburg agents as well. They burned villages suspected of harboring them. They destroyed churches where rebels had prayed. And in one of the darkest decisions in European history, they exhumed and destroyed over 8,000 graves from the region, erasing not just the dead, but their memory. By 1722, it was over. No treaties were signed. No borders were drawn. Just a cold silence, enforced by fear. Generations passed. The story faded. And what little survived was dismissed as folklore, nationalist fantasy, or peasant superstition. But the scars remained. In the 1990s, during the Yugoslav wars, a researcher named Dragan Vukovic discovered a hidden archive beneath the ruins of a church in Novi Sad. Inside were 11 letters, all written by Katarina, each signed with the same words, "For those who history forgets, we remember." The letters were confiscated by authorities. Dragan was later found dead in what was ruled a hunting accident. The documents were never released. Some say the war never happened, that it was a series of unrelated uprisings, that Katarina was a myth. But myths don't leave bloodstains. Today, textbooks still ignore this war, politicians still deny it, and history classrooms still skip the years between 1718 and 1722, as if nothing happened. But if you walk the back roads of the Balkans, speak to the old women who still sing forbidden songs, or dig deep enough into state archives, a different picture emerges. Picture of betrayal, of silence weaponized, of truth buried beneath the ruins of empires. They erased the war, but they couldn't erase its consequences, because the borders that bled during those years still pulse with unrest. The ethnic tensions they tried to contain still boil just beneath the surface, and the silence they enforced has become a curse that still echoes in every denied atrocity, every manipulated memory, and every forgotten hero. So next time you open a history book and notice a gap, ask yourself, what happened there? And who decided you weren't allowed to know?